Good morning, good afternoon, or good night to everyone. First of all, I would like to appreciate the Data Science Portuguese Association for inviting me to be here today talking in this Insight 2020 conference. And the topic that I will bring, it's the use of data on elite football. My name is Francisco Tavares. I'm from Lisbon, Portugal. I've worked almost my entire career in professional rugby. I work in Portugal, New Zealand and Scotland. Currently I work in Sporting Clube De Portugal as a performance coordinator. I've done my master's and PhD in sports sciences in Portugal and New Zealand respectively. I still conduct some research. I supervise some PhD and master students. I have some certifications in the area of sports sciences, and I still do some collaborations with some companies in the sports science area. Okay, and just a quick brief overview of Sporting Clube de Portugal. We have 46 academies worldwide, 27 of them in Portugal. We have around 7,500 players. Here in this picture you can see our main academy. It sits just outside Lisbon in an area called Alcochete. We have around 200 players from the under 14s all the way up to under 23s, and then we have 55 players from the main team and the B team. From the age of 13 to 17, we have 65 intern players that live with us. Therefore, we need to have all the support areas that a teenager needs to grow. Well, it's very interesting. Every time I speak or I lecture, I tend to go away from data, from the stats, from data analysis, and go more into the physiology and methodology of training. In this case, in this conference, it will be a bit the other way around. I will run away from the physiology and methodology of training and try to give you an insight of how do we use the data. As I always say to my students in the sports science area, we need to be very smart on how we use our time and resources. Therefore, we need to differentiate very well what is interesting, what is important, and what is indispensable to the best applied. So how do we use data in sports science? We use data to answer to some questions, and some example of these questions are how was the training load of a player on a training session on a match per week? Is a player being underloaded or overloaded? Are week-to-week changes in training load progressive? In comparison to his peers, what are his weak and strong physical points? How ready is a player to step up to an older age group? So these are some of the questions that we raise every day. There are a lot more questions every day. There is a new question to be solved, and we use data to support us giving answers to these questions. And what we know about football is that the football competition, the match of football, is increasing in terms of the physical qualities. These authors analyzed the Premier League match across 7 different seasons, and they have observed that the physical demands of the game were higher. So the game is now a more demanding game, and the values are quite significant, as you can see here. 35% of sprint running distance, 80% on the number of sprints, so it's quite significant. And for this reason, we need to build more robust, fit, powerful, strong athletes that can tolerate these training loads and can perform and hopefully get free of injury. In sporting, we have 8 areas to support the player. Myself, I'm the coordinator of the sports science department. As I told you, we do indeed use a lot of data, but we need to be very smart on the way that we use the data, and especially how we report the data. We want to make the reports meaningful for the players and coaching staff. and the players and the coaching staff do not care or understand if we use MATLAB routines to treat the data, if we use Excel, if we use inferential statistics to define the thresholds, and so on, so on. What they want is accessible information, friendly user reports that provide the questions, the answers to the questions that they raise. So the process of collecting and treating data is divided in four steps. So we collect individual and team data, and this we normally do in two big areas: the physical performance data and the football training load data. So the physical performance data are the tests, the physical tests that we conduct with the players, and they are able to answer questions like how powerful is an athlete, how fast is an athlete, how fit is an athlete, is this athlete faster than other athletes on his age group and on his position, and so on and so on. So examples of these tests are, like you can see, these young kids being tested. So just here, just the power output and the force output that these players produce. In terms of the football training load data, we track the locomotive data. We use GPS to do that, and we are able to get a lot of locomotive data, different metrics that we look into. We are able to answer to questions like how many accelerations and decelerations did an athlete perform, how much did an athlete sprinted on a game, or how much did an athlete sprint on a training session. Is the player training as he play? Is the training loads of the week high enough to maintain the player fit to play the game? And so on, so on. So there are numbers of questions that we solve or we try to solve through the data. We then pull the data into the databases, and we use these databases not only to create the reports for the coaching staff and players, but also to define the standards and thresholds. And these standards and thresholds are automatically updated when we put in some new data, and we do that on a daily basis. And so we calculate these standards, and some examples of standards that we calculate are the individual training load thresholds. So we look from an acute and a chronic standpoint of view. Acute meaning the training day, and chronic meaning the training week. And in terms of acute, we report relative to the match intensity. In terms of the chronic, we report in comparison to the previous 8 weeks of that player. In terms of the physical quality standards from the tests that we do with the players 3 times a year, we create the standards based on our historical data, and we group it by age, chronological age, and position. Then we do a lot of other standards like individual match performance, training drill standards, so the coaches they can have an understanding to if that player train above or below what he normally does, and so on, so on. So here you can see an example of the chronic training loads on the vertical lines. On the vertical columns, you can see the training weeks. So from week 44, in this case, to week 54, and the colors that you can see are the intensity of the training load. So we color scheme the intensity, going from very low in blue to very high in red. Each line represents a different metric. We track 4 different metrics for the players in terms of the chronic responses to training, and each 4 lines represent a player. Okay. Then what we do with this is we use the standards, and we are able to understand and detect red flags. Red flags are those cases or those scenarios where a player, for some reason, have been having a low training load for a few weeks, and as you can see on the bottom example here, that's what happened. So the player was actually thick, so he couldn't train. So his training load was quite low. So we recommend that the load progression for next week. We recommend the load for the next week to be progressively higher and not go from a blue color into a yellow or red color. So there we have cumulative data of the last 4 training weeks, and this is our weekly part of our weekly report. We track these 4 locomotive metrics. We color scheme relative to individual historical data the last 8 weeks, and we provide a short descriptive recommendation on the adjustments to the next training week. In terms of the daily reports, we also use a color scheme, this time relative to the match intensity. What you can see on the lines are the different players of the training squad, and what you can see on the columns are the different locomotive metrics that we look at on a daily basis. And so we do these reports on a daily basis. We have different running metrics that we report and look at. We use a color scheme relative to individual match performance, and the standards are created from the average of the top 5 individual matches where a player played over 70 minutes. And again, this is all done automatically. So whenever a player plays a game, we get new data in, and if the game is above his previous top 5 matches, then it automatically updates the standards. The physical performance tests, we use them to try to find weak points on the players. We test a lot of tests. We just report the ones that are more important for us. We have 4 standards for each test to improve on average, good or very good. And these standards are defined by age and position. And obviously that together, all this data allow us to create priorities on the training designing for that particular player. So if a player is weak and the other player is just unfit, the 2 players should not have the same training program, and we create opportunities throughout the training week to try to go and work on those weak points. Well, and as a football academy that we are, one of our main goals is to step up players, hopefully up to the main team. And this is just another way we use the data. The question of this report was, is this player ready to perform in an older age group? And this was a player playing on the under-19s. He was 17 years old, so it's quite young for the squad he was playing already. But there was some interest on pushing him forward. So on the left side, we just compare these body characteristics, just body weight, height, and skin folds. On the right side, we start looking at these performance numbers. Not only from a performance standpoint of view, but also from an injury prevention standpoint of view. So on the top graph on the right side, you can see some tests and the comparison to players that play on the same position on the under-23s and B team, so older age groups. And these tests are analytical tests, fitness tests, power tests, strength tests, speed, and so on. Then we look a bit more into football specific, namely locomotive data, so inside the pitch. We look first at match performance to see how this player performs in comparison to his peers. See if the player is capable to play an entire game from a physical standpoint of view or not, and if not, we can find strategies to boost these game metrics. And lastly, obviously, the cumulative training week. So we compare what is this player used to do on the under 19s versus what the other teams on the older age groups are doing on the same position again, and try to understand if this player is ready to fully train with these older age groups or not, and if not, we just try to find solutions and and step load this player in a way that is safe to push him forward. Well, and there are some further steps that need to be done in terms of data analytics in football. Machine learning is a reality. Some teams are doing it more as a side project rather than put it in practice. Just another area that will definitely grow in the near future. And I'm sure some of you will be interested in read this recent review. Well, that's all for me. I'll leave you my contacts. Please feel free to contact me. Your questions will be more than welcome. Enjoy the rest of your conference. Bye.